Frieren, Beyond Journey's End. So this is an anime that I really wanted to talk about. I think it's a little bit of an interesting choice for it to be the first show that I talk about in this channel in general, because I'm a big fan of different shows and animes, and I haven't done this on this channel, so I don't know why this is going to be the first one I'm going to be talking about. But it's probably mainly because I've watched it recently, and I feel like this show, first of all, is very fresh in my mind because I just watched it about 3 days ago. I've actually watched it twice, all the episodes that came out, and I'll talk a little bit about that before. But this is a show that has a lot of details and nuances to it that I want to talk about. And I feel like if it's not fresh, I will forget possibly or not be as accurate. I've actually re recorded this now 3 times, spent a lot of time on it. And the reason why I did that is because before I commented on it again, I wanted to give it a chance and watch it one more time. Because, and I'm glad I did, because there were a lot of little details that I missed, which I really want to talk about. So I'm actually re-recording this video, and now I'm sick. So if I sound a little off, it's because I'm sick. So I apologize. This is a very unique and weird show. Okay, it is absolutely fantastic. I'll start by saying that right off the bat, but it's very unique and very different. I'm not sure if there's anything out there that I can compare it to. I'm sure that there's people that have watched a lot more animes than I have in different shows that can possibly come up with a comparison. I can't. Um, to me, this is one of the most unique shows I've ever seen. I don't know that it's my favorite anime, but it's definitely, for this year, it's probably the best one I've watched. And it's probably one of the best that I've watched in a long time. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Which is interesting because you will hear me throughout this video referring to this anime as mundane. Nothing happens. It's a little dull, and all of those things are very deliberate, and that's how they purposely made the show. And there are reasons for that, which I really want to get into. That's why I thought this was an interesting one to do a little bit of an analysis on, and hopefully maybe convince you to at least give it a shot and watch it because it's definitely worth a watch. So before we really get into what the anime, what's the theme of the anime, what its story is, characters, and all that, I think I want to first start saying by what exactly makes this show so amazing and what I liked about it so much, and then we can get into the specific details of it. So what I really like on this show, number one, is it's a gigantic change of pace from most things that we've seen, not just in anime, but in society in general as of right now. It's a huge break from all the extremely high octane stuff that has always come out. And this is coming from someone who, the last anime I watched was Goblin Slayer, which was absolutely amazing. I highly recommend Goblin Slayer. This is like the exact extreme opposite. So it was a big shock for me, and I think that's why it left such an impression. And I like animes like Black Lagoon, Dragon Ball, Naruto, and such. Samurai X. I mean, I can go on a list, right? But these are more action-driven animes, right? This is not like that. This is a much more subtle anime, and it focuses on different things that I really like, and it focuses on really small things that if you're not really actively watching and actively not just paying attention, but really getting into it, if you're just passively watching it on the background or listening to it, you're going to miss a lot of these subtle details. This is an anime that communicates a lot of what it's trying to say and show you through character expressions, like facial expressions, eye motions, and through subtle details that maybe if you don't watch it twice or you're not watching it um, as actively the first time, you'll miss on those, which I definitely did. That's why I'm saying it was interesting to watch it a second time. I realized a lot of the things I didn't realize the first time watching it. Um, and I thought that was pretty incredible, the level of detail in some of these little interactions and little things that happen that, again, if you're not paying attention, they'll totally go by you. And I think that in a world where we live where everything seems to be trying to outdo each other with shock value and vulgarity and nudity and things like that. This is a show that totally breaks from that mold, and it's super refreshing. I feel like we live in a world where, humor has to be more and more vulgar, or has to be more and more shocking. Content has to be more and more, gory and extreme. And the thing, because we've seen all this so many times, there's nothing wrong with that per se. It's just that because we've seen a lot of these same themes so many times, and similar, so many shows are out there, and we've seen the same story a million times, the revenge story, the rescue my daughter that got kidnapped story, or whatever. They have to keep outdoing themselves, and we have to keep taking it to another extreme. Don't get me wrong, like, again, using Goblin Slayer as an example, that's a show that takes it to an extreme, and it's awesome. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that this is a nice change of pace. It's very different in that sense. Not only regarding the action and gore and things like that are not as present on the show. There is some of that, but it's not the main focus of the show for sure, which we'll talk about. And when I talk about different artistic expressions trying to outdo themselves, I don't just mean in the sense of the gore and action, comedy, where everything has to be more explicit and take it to the next level and be more vulgar, because we're trying to outdo each other, right? The comedy of 10 years ago might not be as funny as the comedy of today because these themes get overused. So you have to keep reinventing the wheel, or even if you're not reinventing the wheel, you're taking it to the next extreme. So it's a little more shocking. So it's a little more different, right? We've seen several tropes a million times that if we're not taking it to another extreme and we're going to present the same thing with the same package, we've seen that already, right? And I think that a big thing of that in particular that falls with, it's not just anime, but particularly with anime, is sexual themes, which, hey, there's nothing wrong with that. But one thing I've gone pretty tired of in anime is this stupid booba dorky humor that seems to be present in every anime. Not just the fan service, but it seems that every anime has to have every so many episodes some cute girl that falls on some dude's face with her legs spread open, and then his nose bleeds and he flies away. Like, I'm just kind of sick of this type of humor. I never thought it was funny in the first place. Um, and now it's definitely gone old, right? And I'm a guy where it's like I don't like that stuff too. I don't mind if there's some of that in some shows. Like, there's a lot of shows, like, again, I'm just off the top of my head, like Black Lagoon is one of them, that there is sexualization. A lot of these shows have sexualized topics and themes, and characters that are sexualized, but the humor is not stupid. It's much more mature in the way that these are presented, right? And again, if you're into that, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying it's getting a little overused, and I'm not particularly a fan of that humor. I'm a guy where, hey, dude, if you want to show me hentai, show me hentai. If you want to show me porn, show me porn. Like, don't take away from what I'm watching to just put this in there just for the sake of fan service. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like a lot of these animes, the placement of certain sexual themes are completely out of place. Like, we're either going to watch something that is sexual or it has nothing to do with that. When you're watching something that has nothing to do with that and it's just introduced there for either fan service or comedic factor, I think it has to be done in a really tactful way to where it doesn't take from the overall presentation. And I feel like it's almost been something that's cookie cutter. It's a way to attract more fans to the show, maybe make more iconic, figurines, marketing, whatever. And again, a lot of the times I feel like it takes away from things. So it's not like I'm against it. I just feel like most places that I've seen it, it's completely out of place and it's stupid. And one of the things that I like about this show is it has none of that. The show has pretty much no sexual themes that I've observed. Um, there is none of this dumb booba humor that I'm talking about. There's some gore, but it's not to the extreme of what we've been accustomed to. Like, the show is not trying to take any of these extremes to the next level. Actually, a lot of them are more in the background. They're more secondary. They don't take away from the overall vibe and experience of the show. And that's what I've really liked. It doesn't seem like there's no hook on this show. That's another thing I'm going to talk a lot about. There is nothing in this show that from the beginning it's trying to get you hooked right away. I feel like we live in a time where, especially because of movies are compressed in a 2 hour format where we have to cram all this story in. where, I don't know, let's use whatever, swept Jason Bourne, whatever, as an example, John Wick. Somebody's daughter gets kidnapped, they gotta save her, there's an antagonist, the action starts, whatever happens at the end, and that's it. Like, I don't know how to explain, but things have to be compressed in these 2 hours, and we almost don't have time to almost like digest the story and really develop the characters and really develop the scenario, which is why I'm not a big fan as much of movies as I am of shows in general, not just anime, because I think it gives time to properly do character development. But one thing that I really don't like about anime is fillers. There's animes that I'm a huge fan of, like Naruto, right? Where there's just an insane amount of fillers. Oh, you can skip the fillers. That's fine. I get that. But that it's relevant to what I'm going to talk about because a lot of this anime, if it was introduced in other anime, similar things would be considered filler. But because the presentation of this show, it's almost like it's one big filler. Like, I hate to put it this way, but most of the things happening are very mundane and everyday things. They don't feel out of place because that is the entire theme of the show. When you have an extremely action packed show, that there's a way to slow things down and still keep things interesting, which most of these shows do a good job of at certain points, but there's other points where we're just literally doing filler. And it feels like the intent is just to drag out the series as long as they can and keep generating revenue, which is a big criticism I have for a lot of these shows now. And again, I'll just talk about it and get into it because I think that this show is a great change of pace to that, and it turns a lot of this downtime into a really legitimate part of the show in a way where it's not filler, because it's the way the entire show goes, to be honest. So this show takes a very common theme that we've seen a million times and it takes it on a very interesting direction, which interesting is not just the right word. It's a very not only unique, but it's a big risk, the direction that they took the show in, because I can see this not being for everyone. It seems that most people are liking it, which surprises me, but that's cool, because I want this show to be successful. But I would think it would be a more niche audience kind of show. We've seen this theme a million times. It's about a party of heroes that, slays some generic bad guy. Typical story of saving the world, defeating the Demon King or Demon Lord, whatever he's called. And that would be, you would think that would be the story. But this story actually takes place after these events have happened. And you almost wonder a lot of times in these shows, okay, well, the happily ever after type of thing. Okay, well, after they defeat the boss, the land is now in peace, and it's the end of the story. This is like, it starts from the end of the story, which is extremely unique. So this is after the party of these heroes have already defeated this major bad guy there, the main antagonist, the Demon Lord. And it takes place after these events, and it tells the story of these characters and what they do with their life after. What's interesting about this show is it focuses very heavily on the mundane aspects of life, right? And not just mundane, on just the everyday living, which normally would not be interesting. And what I think is so amazing is how they've managed to make these little mundane interactions and experiences and just the act of living so profound and beautiful and interesting. We get to see the story from the perspective of this elf, who is one of these party members. And what's unique about this character is she doesn't age. Well, she does age, but she ages at a very slow time compared to humans. And what's interesting is as characters in the show and her party members get older, she doesn't get old. I think it says, after the events take place there and the story starts, it's something like 80 years. And the character is several centuries old. I don't know. I don't remember if it specifies how old she is, but I want to say 1,000. I don't know. She's several centuries old. That's what I know. Um, and because of that, she is a very dull and unimpressed person. Um, and this is a very, very unique character. I love this character. And the reason I love it, and this is a such an interesting way to put it, the entire objective of this show, in my opinion, is making mundane things, showing that the mundane is not mundane. And this character reflects that in every sense of the word, because If I had to describe this character in 3 words, is she is uninteresting, uninterested, and dull. And and she's an extremely interesting character, contradicting what I just said. But if I had to describe it, that would be the way I would describe her. And that sounds like the worst protagonist for a show ever, right? Sounds like, okay, it sounds like a really boring character. But what's interesting is that that personality that she has plays into everything that the show is about. So, again, because this character, she's lived for so long, she's always around humans, and the show explains this, that there's not a lot of elves left. They don't reproduce, they don't have reproductive urges and things like that. So, for the most part, so they're quietly going extinct. She says that in a very nonchalant term, but as a viewer, you can feel that. So she's mostly around humans. And you can see that even though she doesn't express that most of the time, it's something that's really pained her. And you almost get the impression that it's not that she doesn't care about people and things, is she's just been scarred by it. Her emotions have been eroded over time, which makes sense. It's what you would expect from someone that's been around for so long. So she's seen everybody die. She's seen things change. So her perception of time is warped and is completely different from the other characters around her. And what's so amazing about the show and the way that they do it is we live vicariously through Frieren, the character, and we get to really be in her shoes and feel how she feels. Um, the show focuses a lot on the passage of time, and we see it through her perspective. And we start almost feeling like her, like time passes it, it's almost like it doesn't matter because the things are happening around her, but for her, nothing changes. So if something takes 2 years to happen, that's like 2 days for her, right? Versus the people around her, that's a long time. And so the story starts when they're coming back from this great adventure. They kind of go their each separate ways, and it's interesting. They're talking about, well, what are we going to do now? Probably going to get a job, right? The world is saved, but I still got to eat. We got to move on with our lives. And they each go their separate ways. In Frieren, they say their goodbyes, and she's almost like, oh, well, I'll see you guys again soon. And then she goes her separate ways. And 50 years go by since she's left. And to her, 50 years, again, 50 years is like 5 months, 5 days. It's not that long of time. But when she comes back, she's shocked to see that all her friends are old. They're old people now. And one of the characters there, Heimel, I think I'm pronouncing it right, Heimel, he's essentially seems to be regarded as the main hero of the story, and somewhat of a love interest, not on her part, but definitely on his part for her. And when she comes back to see him, she's very surprised to see that he's now a bald, bearded old man, versus at the beginning of the show, he's very, stereotypical pretty boy looking anime guy, young buck type dude, right? And now he's very old and decrepit. And she mentions, "Wow, you look old." It's very funny because she has no tact, and I think that a lot of what's interesting is the show seems to make us think that Frieren doesn't have any emotions, which I think is very incorrect. And this is so beautiful because all her emotions are not expressed verbally. All the emotion of the show from this character is expressed, I hate to be redundant, but it's expressed through expressions, facial expressions, eye movements, body postures. That she is more so, if I had to describe her, she is just socially inept. She's not emotionless, she's not heartless, she's socially inept. And Heimel seems to understand this about her. And this is mentioned in several subtle ways throughout the story where there's a reason why all these party members like her. It's because they spent 10 years with her and they've gotten to know that this is just kind of the way she is. But she's not a mean or heartless or evil person. She's just socially dull, and her perception of things is very different than humans because, again, she's not a human. A lot of things that are once in a lifetime opportunities for most people or incredible, she's seen them a million times, or they're uninteresting, or she's just not as easily impressed. And it's not because, again, she's heartless. It's because of the way she's lived and that emotional erosion that I think has happened. and the show portrays that in a very beautiful way. So again, going back to the story, so this is the point. I don't want to spoil too much of the anime, but this is like, first episode, right? So she comes back, regroups with her friends, and sees them again. They're all older, but they're all still alive. So four characters would be Heimel, which is the type of one of the warriors there. Human. There is um, Frieren, the elf that she's a mage, which I've been talking about. Then there's a priest who's Heiter, and then Eisen, who's a warrior dwarf as well. I like Eisen the best, other than the main character. I like the main character a lot. I like Eisen because most of the, he's similar to her in the sense that most of the emotion and expression and the way he communicates is nonverbal. Um, and funny enough, because he's not a human, but he's a very human character as well, and we'll talk about that. But so she sees these friends again, and they go on like a one last type of adventure hour that they've been talking to go about. Watch this, which there's more nuance to that, but she takes them to a place 50 years later. The whole point why they saw each other again is because they saw this meteor shower when they returned from their adventure, and she wasn't impressed and said, "There's a better place for us to see it in 50 years when it happens again, and I want to take you guys there." And they thought she almost thought that she wasn't being serious, because 50 years is like, "I'll never see you again," but she was serious. Okay, no, in 50 years I'll see you, because again, 50 years is not that long of a time for her. I don't think she realizes how much time that really is for humans, and that's part of the show. She starts realizing um, how warped her sense of time is, and you can see that Frieren is at her happiest when other people around her are happy. She finds joy in making other people happy, even if she's not necessarily happy. She's happy because other people are happy, and I think that's a lot of what the show she learns throughout the show. So, don't spoil too much, but as the character moves on with her life, there is no. What's interesting about this show is there's no great big next quest that's happening. There is no new antagonist that is developed that Frieren has to now defeat. There is no major objective or thing that she needs to accomplish. Frieren actually spends most of her time indulging in her hobbies for the most part, and really wasting time. One of her main hobbies is to waste time. She makes it abundantly clear throughout the show and very explicitly that she has no regard for other people's time. She doesn't care how long things take, because for her they don't take that long, and she's not in a rush to do anything because she's not dying. So she spends most of her time collecting spells and chotskis. It's kind of weird to explain, but that's kind of what the character spends most of her time doing, and not useful spells. For the most part, they're very mundane things like how to brew tea, how to make sour grapes, how to make this, which we'll talk about the sour grapes because that's a nice detail in there. And it goes to show that every little thing that's presented in the show has a meaning behind it, or at least a reason for it. But anyway, she spends most of her time collecting these little mundane spells, and that's kind of her hobby. And again, some of these little chotskis and things that she collects throughout the show. And what's really interesting about this show is you keep expecting things to happen, and they just don't. Things just don't happen. It is very slow paced, and it's the best way I can describe it as a type of show where you're gonna take your shoes off, turn on the fireplace, and just kick back and relax. And this show put me in. I even watched it again because it just put me in such a good vibe and mood, and just it brings you an overall feeling of calm constantly. Every time the show seems like it's going to get a little bit more intense, it just doesn't. There is some action on there, right? There is some, but you can tell that that's not the main focus of the show. And what's interesting about the what little action that happens on this show is very trivial, and it's deliberately made that way. Um, Most of the fight scenes and action that happens in the show is like 5 or 10 seconds. It's clearly not the focus of things, even though it's there. And again, it's presented in a way where I wouldn't say that uninteresting is the right word, but it's clearly not the focus of the show. The show is not, doesn't have these, even though it's beautifully animated, it doesn't have these over the top, 5 episode long fights between Sasuke and Itachi or whatever, or Vegeta and Goku. None of that. Most of the fights take 5 or 10 seconds, and it's deliberately done in a way where that's not the main focus of the show, which is actually very, very cool because it doesn't take away from it. And without spoiling anything, when things pick up a little bit, which right where I stopped on the show, they started picking up a little bit on the action side. I'm hopeful that it dials it back again, because it almost takes away from the vibe and the focus of the show. And I hope that it's a quick passing as well. Because what's interesting about the show is again is it's not focusing on these overarching sagas or boss monsters or level ups or power ups or Luffy Gear 5 or Goku God transformation or this or that or the Sharingan becoming the Mangekyo Sharingan, which no, I'm just kidding, right? There's nothing wrong with these shows, but there's really none of that progression, right? Because this character has been alive for so long, it's you almost get the feeling like she already knows everything. Nothing's really a whole lot of a challenge for her, and that's you don't just get the feeling. It's pretty obvious that most things are not a challenge for her because she's been around for so long. She already kind of knows everything there is to know. So most of the development is not on her getting stronger. It's mostly on her finding her sense of purpose and her sense of happiness, which sounds really boring and something that an 80-year-old would like, but give it a shot and you'll see what I mean. It is very beautiful the way that this is conveyed, which leads me to my next point. I could talk more about the show, but ultimately I don't want to spoil it. Even though the story itself is not the main focus of things, which is interesting, the story itself of the show is not the main focus of it. It is the character development, and the story happens during these mundane moments. The story is not about this overarching plot where we're going from point A to point B and the things that happen in between and these fights and this overall saga that's happening. It's mostly about the day-to-day things that are happening, and the story unfolds almost on a day-to-day basis. And that's a weird way to put it, but it's almost unfolding, and we're getting to see in a very slow pace way the everyday things that are happening, and it focuses again on the very mundane and everyday stuff more than it does on what you would traditionally consider interesting. And which leads me to my next point here of what I really like is that the show, first of all, the show does not hold your hand. It doesn't explain most things to you. And actually, it doesn't explain to you what it's trying to do. It's up to you to notice it. And frankly, I guess if you don't, it might not be for you type of thing, which is a very weird and risky proposition. This is an anime that was done by Madhouse, which has made several other amazing animes, Black Lagoon being one of them, amongst other animes as well. What was it? Death Note is another one they made. Paprika, Trigun, among others. Right? They've made several good animes that are nothing like this. So it's interesting the turn that they took with this, and I really like it for that reason because it's what makes it unique and stands out from other animes that we've gotten so used to seeing the same themes and same type of plots over and over, and the ways they develop characters. And it's interesting that that's the studio that made it because when I first watched it, I could have sworn this was a Studio Ghibli anime, which is interesting. Like, obviously, it's probably not because they mostly make movies. But it's funny, everything from the art style to the atmosphere and things like that, it really gives me Studio Ghibli vibes, interestingly. Now, one of the things that I found really funny about this show and interesting, again, choices that they've made is much like how the main character, Frieren, doesn't seem to care about time in general in other people's time, and it doesn't seem to care about their feelings, which often frustrates the people around her. The same way that she's like that, it seems like the creators of the show also are the same way, as in they don't care about your time and they don't care about how you feel. They are not trying to speed things up to keep you interested. They are not trying to hook you into the show with any particular disaster or plot development or sexual thing that happens, or they're not trying to keep you interested in any way other than it is what it is. You either like it or you don't, which is a really weird and interesting thing when your goal is to sell and market a show to where it just seems like they don't care about your time and they don't care how you feel about the show, and they're not trying to keep you engaged. We're just gonna make what we made, and you watch it if you like it. Don't watch it if you don't. I thought it was really funny. And this is not something in a disrespectful way. Like, they're not trying to disrespect your time. They are just taking their time. They are not particularly concerned in keeping you engaged. They are developing things the way that they think they should be developed and in the theme of the show and what they intended for the show. And they're not trying to appeal to a particular audience or, again, get you hooked in any way and keep you watching. They're just going to do what they're going to do. It almost feels like this is some sort of like someone's passion project, like almost like their last work before retirement, and they're gonna do and express themselves the way they want, and they don't care how you feel. You either love it or you don't, and we're gonna do what we're gonna do. That's what it feels like, which is, again, an interesting choice. When again, the goal, it usually for these is, yes, absolutely entertainment, artistic expression, but right, it needs to sell for it to keep going, for people to keep the lights on. Like, the goal of the show is sales ultimately, right? So it's interesting that they went in that direction because it almost feels like they're unconcerned about that. They are more concerned about truly expressing themselves fully in their art. Like I was saying, the thing that you, if you're not actively watching and really paying attention on these subtle details, you will miss out on, and you'll miss out on the entire vibe of the show. I think I said this on the beginning of the video. The show does not communicate most things and themes through explicitly, right? So if a character likes something, they don't just say, I like that. We observe that they like that in the way they are based on their actions. There's no there's no overall narration for the show, right? There's no narrator or main protagonist that is very expressive. I hate to use Naruto like an example. Like, I love Naruto, but I'm just an example. We know what Naruto's about. We know his story. We see flashbacks of what happened to him. He's a very expressive character. Wears his heart on his sleeves. Frieren is not like that. She does not wear her heart on her sleeves. It's actually very hard to really know what she's about, and we see the way she feels and her emotions through very subtle facial expressions, body movements, and actions, which is very interesting because I feel like most of these shows are trying to appeal to a mass audience most of the time. And these are things that are very mature and hard to pick up on. So I would not be surprised if most people who watch this don't notice these subtle details. I didn't notice a lot of them the first time I watched, which is why I went back and rewatched it with my wife because she fell asleep during the first episode because it's just such a relaxing show. I mean, but she wanted to watch it again. I'm like, hey, I'm down because there's some things I feel like I miss. I want to rewatch it. And I'm glad I did because I'm now re-recording this video with a different perspective on the show. Um, and I'll use little things as an example. So there's one character who is this little girl, and we see her growing up as she becomes Frieren's apprentice, and there's little things like, for example, the show doesn't say that this character likes animals, right? There's no point where she says, "Oh, I love animals," right? Which it's just it. Most shows are like that. It's very easy to know what characters are about, but it shows in several different scenes where one of these scenes, when she's a little kid, she's kind of hiding these little squirrels for whatever reason because she wants to keep them with them or keep them warm or whatever the reason is. So you already see that, and it's like, hey, those are rats. And it's like, oh, I just wanted to. I don't remember what she says, but you can tell she liked them for whatever reason. And later on the show, there's a lot of like things that if you're just passively watching, you would think, all right, that's kind of cute, but I don't know why that's on the show. There's this other scene, for example, where she's following Frieren, and totally unrelated to the story, as she's spying on her, this cat just comes up to her, and for no reason, this cat is not important on the story, doesn't become some sort of mascot, never shows up on the show again, but she goes and pats the cat and smiles and doesn't say anything. But we can tell that she likes animals because every time that an animal shows up, she doesn't say, "Oh, I love animals," or "Oh, I like this, I don't like that." It's just very subtle. She sees a cat, she pets it and smiles. And it's the same thing with Frieren. We'll see a scene here where, in this scene here that I'm showing, so Frieren is making a surprise for this girl, right, for her birthday. And we just see out of nowhere, like, oh, let's go eat. And she walks a little weird. Like, the other character doesn't comment on, like, why is she walking weird? And us as viewers are, maybe that's an anime thing that she's walking like that. You know, if you're not paying, like, why is she walking weird? Well, the show explained to us that she acts funny. It's shown us that she acts a little funny when she's hiding something. So she's walking a little weird because she doesn't want to say, hey, I have a surprise for you. It's little things like that. Or, for example, we this character, one of her main things, Frieren, is she regrets not getting to know Heimel and some of her friends a little bit better. So she's trying to make up for lost time and retrace her journey through several places that she was with these friends to get to know them a little bit better after their death, because she regrets not having spent more time with them. And they seem to have known everything about her, and she knew nothing about them. And she feels really bad about that. So one of the things that very nonchalantly mentions at the beginning of the show is she's learning all these spells, and this apprentice is saying, "Oh, you learned a spell for this, you learned a spell for that." And one of the spells they mentioned very briefly that she learns is how to make grapes sour, which seems really stupid. And it's almost like when it's presented, it seems like it's presented for comedic effect. Like, it passes you by. Okay, this is one of the 10 things that she's learned for no reason, like brewing tea, like making shaved ice, like really stupid things, right? But later on the show, actually, during this same episode seems to have a lot of very subtle ways that they express different things and conclude things. She's speaking with the other girl there, and her apprentice, and she recaps, like, this girl already knows what she's going to order, and she finds that very interesting. Like, wow, how do you know that I like this pudding? I don't even know what you're going to order. I don't know anything about you. And she recalls this time where she was with these party members, her friends, and they already knew that she was going to order the pudding too. And she felt bad because they're like, well, how the heck do you know that? Well, we know you. We've been together for 10 years. She's like, 10 years is nothing. I don't know anything about you guys. They're like, well, maybe we should tell you then what we're into. So all these characters start telling them what they like and what they're into. And one of the characters, Eisen, tells her, oh, one of the things I like, my favorite dessert, is sour grapes. The more sour, the better. And then it makes sense why earlier on the show, one of the spells she made a point to learn how to use or cast was how to make sour grapes, because she wanted to try them and almost connect with her friend that she doesn't have around her anymore. It's almost like she's trying to understand him. And the show never says that. This could pass you by and you wouldn't notice. Like, you probably wouldn't even remember the sour grape thing, right? It's little things like that that are so subtle, and they'll just pass you by if you're not actively paying attention. And again, the other thing that I think is beautiful on the show is the way that, I've said this a million times now, but the way that the character conveys emotion. They're through subtle facial expressions, again, eye movements, hand movements, body movements, and mostly actions as well. But I think that one of the things that is so beautiful about the show is the way that the characters express themselves. Because in real life, we don't go around saying, I like cats, I love this, I love that. We just do, right? Most of the times. I mean, there's sometimes context for why you would say that. But because of that, it creates a level of immersion where there's almost none of that third wall being broken, where a character has to constantly remind us what they're about. There's none of that. You just observe based on the character way that they act and their expressions. You find out what they're about and what they like and what they don't like and what they're feeling. It never communicates any of that to us. It shows us. And much like the little subtle other things, this entire show is about these turning the mundane into interesting through these subtle things that are happening. And it kind of like a slice of life show. It really makes you think about your life and our existence and time and things like that. But I think that it's such a risk because most people won't notice this, and it's so different and almost dull and slow paced compared to most things we're seeing, that there's almost, for a lot of people, there's not a big hook that's going to keep you watching, which is interesting because I watched this entire show in one sitting in one night, all the 8 episodes that are out so far. I think for the first season there'll be 28. I just watched the whole thing in one sitting and I couldn't put it down. But I don't think it'll be like that for everyone because again, there's no major hook. There's no major tragedy or something horrible that's always happening from the start. Like there's no Uchiha member that murdered their entire family and now this kid has to avenge his family, or this kid that has some demon locked up inside of him and he has to prove himself and be the leader of the village. Like nobody's trying to do anything or be anything. They're just existing. And that's what's so unique about the show. And these expressions and subtle things that I'm talking about, I think that this is it's so profoundly unique and so beautiful, and it is such a high level of artistic expression that I haven't seen in a very long time or ever, frankly, that I can recall. That I was just so mesmerized by it. I was so captivated by the character and by these things that happen. Again, because it doesn't hold your hand. It doesn't tell you where to go. I think maybe like let's use Dark Souls as an example. A lot of times Dark Souls doesn't hold your hand and tell you where to go. A lot of these games, like it's more interesting when they don't tell you things and you have to figure things out, which more and more I feel like in our society and in life, things are getting dumbed down and chewed up for us and spit out. This show doesn't do that. It takes it back a little bit and it lets you interpret things how you think they should be interpreted and feel things the way you think they should be felt. It doesn't explicitly tell you anything or tell you how you should feel. And again, I think that this is such a beautiful artistic expression. I really can't put it into words. It's one of the most beautiful shows I've ever seen, by far. And again, another thing that I really like is how human and real the characters feel. Without giving too many spoilers, right? Every one of the heroes has, they're noble because they're heroes and they've saved the world, but they have their own self-serving motives for a lot of what they do, or they have quirks that you wouldn't expect from a hero. For example, Hyten, I think Hyten or Hyten, I don't know how to pronounce it, is one of my favorites because he says so little. But one of the things it shows is that before battle, he's always shaking because he's always terrified. And this is clearly a very seasoned warrior that's kind of seen it all, knows it all, but he's always afraid before battle, and he doesn't shy away from saying that, right? Frieren asks him like, "You're shaking. Why are you shaking?" He's like, "Because I'm afraid." And it's like, "Oh, and you just say it just like that? That you're afraid?" Yeah, I'm always afraid before I go into battle. I don't know if I'm gonna die right now, right? But that's what makes me strong. My fear is what's kept me alive for so long. Things like that. Or we have a priest that is extremely corrupt and drinks a lot, or a hero that's very self-serving and narcissistic, right? Or Frieren, who's a hero, but she doesn't really seem to care about a whole lot of people or being a hero or what she's doing. So if I had to recommend this show to anyone, I wouldn't have a particular recommendation. This is a show that is weird to it's hard and difficult to explain to people because it is a weird show. And there's no big hook that you can say, oh, it's a show about this, it's a show about that. It's really hard to really explain what the show is about because if you explain it to someone, it's just going to sound boring. It's one of those shows that it's best left for the person to experience it for themselves and they figure out what they think of it and what they like. I would highly recommend everyone to give this show a try and just watch and see how you feel and what you think. Again, it's not going to be for everyone, but I don't know that I would recommend it for some of the friends that I know, and if I don't think that some people would like it. But I would say, don't take anyone's description of the show, because I've heard different people describing it in different ways, and even myself. We probably make it sound boring, more boring than it is. We probably make the show sound boring because, again, there's no overarching plot. There's no incredible thing that's happening. And we cannot, there's no way to convey in words what the show is really about because none of it is expressed in words. Again, it's all expressed through emotions, facial features, facial expressions, body movements. It's expressed visually. The show is very visual. So to express it verbally takes away from the show. So I would just say just watch it. Don't take anyone's review from it. Don't take my recommendation only or what I'm saying as gospel. Just watch it and you'll see what I'm saying. I would like to get more into and tell you more of what happens, because even though it seems like there's nothing ever happening, there's always something happening. It's just that those things that are happening are not really the focus. The focus is on other things. The focus is on the immersion of us being in this character's shoes and feeling the way she feels, experiencing the passage of time through her eyes and her senses and in sense of existence. Um, we feel like we're in her shoes in a very immersive way. That's what the show is more about than a particular story. That's not to say that there isn't story. That's not to say that there isn't some action. That's not to say that things don't really happen. It's just that they're not the focus. And for you to describe to someone, oh, this happens. It's not even the focus. Nothing is really the focus of the show. You know what I mean? So again, it's hard to verbally express something that's conveyed emotionally and visually. So I would say watch it. Just watch it. Ignore reviews. Maybe if this is the only one you listen to, watch the first few episodes and see what you think for yourself. Highly recommend it.